Now, we are going to touch base with the Member of Parliament for Dennery North. Most of that Mabria Valley region falls into that constituency. He is from the area. He's represented the area into your second term now, I do believe, Mr. Shawn Edwards.
Good afternoon, Calix. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Very good.
And welcome to the lunchroom.
Yeah, thanks for having me once again on the lunchroom. I'm no stranger to the program. I must say it's one of the better midday programs in the country at the moment. And I want to take the opportunity while I'm on to say a special good afternoon to my constituents of Dennery North and by extension St. Lucian at home and abroad. And Calix, you'd allow me to go further to say a special good afternoon to a friend of mine in the U.S., Cuthbert Myers, who always listens not just to your program, but most of the talk shows in the country, and he is always willing and ready to make an objective contribution.
Wonderful.
To the discourse.
Wonderful, wonderful indeed. Now, just a few days ago, I think we saw you debating in the House of Assembly the introduction of an extension of a 90-day state of emergency in the country. And of course, that has been, according to the government, necessary to impose a curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in an attempt to lower our current rate of the spread of COVID-19. Of course, the numbers are very scary right about now. Over 2,137 cases and counting, 22 deaths to date as well, confirmed by the Department of Health. How are the communities in Dennery North coping right about now with the current measures?
Well, as much as possible, people are trying to adhere to the protocols, but as you know, Calix, this is new territory for us as a country and as a community. So we have to constantly be those of us in leadership positions. We have to constantly be appealing to the people to ask them to adhere to the protocols. But I think in the main, people in Dennery North have been cooperating. From the first night of the curfew, when I ventured out just to make an assessment for myself in terms of the extent to which people were obeying the curfew hours, I must tell you that I was very impressed with what I saw driving through the different communities. So I want to take the opportunity to ask the people of Dennery North to continue observing the protocols. And I'm hoping that people all around St. Lucia will do likewise. But generally, I'm satisfied with the manner in which people have been going about it. Of course, you will find a breach here and there, but in the main, I'm satisfied, and people have to be encouraged to continue.
Very early on in the first wave that we saw back in October, November, it seemed that some communities in Dennery North got a lot of attention, and almost being suggested that that is where the epicenter of the current outbreak was focused on. But in terms of the numbers, it has not quite seemed to have panned out in that instance, has it?
Not at all. Yes, I was on the record as saying that if people were coming through the back door and using my constituency as an entry point, that they should desist up to and I was quoted by the government because it was convenient for them to have used that particular quote for their own purposes. And Calix, I will say that I'm not afraid of political reprisal. I'm not afraid of my words being used against me. In much the same way I said it then, that if people were coming through the back door, they should desist, and it is something that I was not going to condone. Today, I still hold that position, that if people are infiltrating the back doors of our country to come in and bring in COVID or whatever other activities that would be facilitated by that, I would denounce it. I will speak out against it. I recall very early when the COVID debate started and the bus driver was tested positive and Oleon was fingered. There was a consideration by the government to cordon Oleon off, not just from the rest of the constituency, but the rest of the country. Because, and to use the word that you used a while ago, Oleon was seen as a place where we had the epicenter of COVID at the time. Subsequent to the bus driver testing positive, I think we only had 2, at most 3 other cases from that particular community. Mm-hmm. Then we saw a spike in other parts of the country, and there was absolutely no consideration given to shutting down communities where the figures were much, much more than what we saw in Oleon. So,
and in that particular example, I think we also even saw the number plate of the bus driver being put out. We have, and since then we've not really seen that level of detail in terms of tackling other potential cases and clusters. I mean, we don't even get information as to whether you've got a cluster developing at a hotel, apparently, even if it exists.
I think it's unfortunate the way some things have been allowed to unfold as it relates to COVID. And what has happened as a result is that people started losing confidence in the process. People started losing confidence in the government machinery in relation to the handling of COVID. But we have to be very careful how we move forward, because I would have made the point in the Parliament and elsewhere when the opportunities were presented to speak on COVID that COVID affects everybody. It affects both gender, it affects people in the upper echelons of society. In other words, nobody is immune. And so we have to be very, very careful how we go about it. If you ask me whether the government has done a good job at handling COVID, I will tell you no. I do not believe that the government has done a good job, and there's no better way to put it than as the minister responsible for health herself said it, that they basically dropped the ball. And when
I think she's actually on record saying that it's not just that they've dropped the ball, that people have dropped the ball. If you got COVID, then you dropped the ball.
When she spoke earlier in the week or late last week, addressing the nation,
right,
she did say, and I quote, "We all dropped the ball."
Right.
But subsequent to that statement being made at the time, she has been quoted as saying that everybody dropped the ball. So now it's almost like a case where she's trying to do some damage control and make it seem now as if it is the people who have been infected who dropped the ball. I think she was right the first time when she said that we all dropped the ball, and I think she was making reference to the government. Calix, at first, we saw that the figures were not spiraling out of control, and some of the measures appeared to be working. And the government was very quick out of the blocks to beat its chest and tell all and sundry that we were doing the best in the world. We were number one in the world. But subsequent to that, and I think the pronouncements of the government in terms of pronouncing victory was a bit premature. And what we've seen today is a case where the situation has basically run away from the government, and it is proving to be a bit challenging to bring it back under control. The other thing that I think the other mistake that the government has made is that they have politicized, contrary to what they may say in the Parliament and elsewhere, I believe they have politicized the management and the handling of COVID. I have made the point repeatedly that the government on its own, the government in a very, very generic sense, where you have only the elected members and their permanent secretaries managing this particular crisis, that is grossly insufficient. There will be a role for the parliamentary opposition. We were voted for by people in our communities, and these people look to us for leadership. And sometimes it really pains me, Calix, to see that I am ready to make a contribution, I am ready to make an intervention, but because I don't have access to state resources, that I cannot make an objective contribution to the fight on COVID. When I want to deploy a town crier in the community to continue encouraging people to wear their mask, I have to find the money from my pocket. And in that same constituency, a candidate has access to state resources, moving around with engineers from the Department of Infrastructure and other government agencies, and I'm just there having to fend on my own to see how I can bring about relief for my people. If there was ever a time in the history of this country where all hands had to be on deck to fight a situation, I think that time is now. And whatever politics we've allowed to infiltrate the management of COVID is something that we have to look to address at the soonest, because people have already lost their lives. There are more people who are going to die from COVID, unfortunately. And I'm not sure that we are already in a position where we can say that we're in a position where we can say that we are going to control the spread in the next 5 weeks or in the next 3 weeks, and things will return to normal. We have a serious challenge on our hands. Yes, we've heard the government speak about the procurement of vaccines and the government trying to roll out measures to complement those that are already in existence. But that can only yield results if people are willing to cooperate with the government. As we speak now, Calix, and I'm sure you are aware that there are a number of scientific polls that have been carried out where people have been asked to opine on their like or their liking or their dislike for the government. And I can tell you the government is not in a very good place where that is concerned. But that notwithstanding, they are the government of the day. And if they can join forces with the opposition and civil society organizations, I think that can only redound to the betterment of our country, and our citizens will be much better for it.
Do you think that it's the elections that is driving some what appears to be quite blatant politicization of certain processes? I quite recently saw a video of an individual, in fact, who was your former permanent secretary in the Ministry of Youth and Sport in the Castries East constituency. Of course, that is a place that same individual ran for in the last general election, was not successful. Now a senator in government for a portfolio for culture, but observing that that individual is in fact giving out laptops, which I understand were procured not through the Department of Education, but through the Department of Economic Development. I think that's Mr. Guy Joseph's ministry. And we're seeing a distribution of laptops in that very same constituency. I think you're kind of suggesting that the same is happening in your own constituency as well.
Absolutely, Calix. As I said earlier, I do not have access to state resources, whether we talk about laptops or other resources of government. I can tell you that late last year, in excess of 50 pre-hurricane stimulus packages were prepared in the form of small contracts to be distributed in the Dennery Basin. I did not preside over a single contract. The ones that were issued in Dennery North, they were all issued by the candidate of the United Workers' Party. As we speak, the candidate is still issuing contracts that are funded by government departments, and that is being done with absolutely no consultation with the office of the parliamentary rep. So for 4.5 years, I'm accustomed to the authority of the Office of Parliamentary Rep in Dennery being usurped, and I'm not really perturbed by it, Calix. I think the people of Dennery North have come a long way. We are a lot more discerning today than we were some years ago, and I believe when the elections are called, the people will make a very decisive statement in terms of what they stand for, what they support, and which of the two parties they believe will work in their best interest.
Do you think right now, and for the past 4.5 years, Dennery North has effectively suffered as a result of you representing them, you not being a member of the ruling party?
Alex, when you compare the government work program in Dennery North, there's absolutely nothing to talk about in 4.5 years. Not even some of the projects that we had already initiated, they would carry through. For instance, you go to Austin Hill. The contracts for the Austin Hill Road rehabilitation were already signed. It wasn't a case where we were putting together the bills of quantities and things of that sort. The road was costed, the contracts were signed, people had already started mobilizing resources at the credit union to go ahead and execute the contract. Elections came, there was a change of government, and the contracts were never honored. Today, the road is in an advanced state of disrepair.
Now, wait, is that the same? Correct me if I'm wrong, because I think I recall the Prime Minister speaking about that very same road, suggesting that one part was done, and the part that was done was where you had certain people who were Labour Party supporters.
Absolute hogwash. Absolute hogwash. And I'm not surprised that the Prime Minister would make such a foolish statement. And it really confirms what a lot of us believe, that the Prime Minister is not even in tune with St. Lucia, let alone him knowing the dynamics of the different communities in St. Lucia. Anybody from Austin Hill or the area will tell you that the section of the road that we attended to in phase 1 was the most critical. There's a gentleman by the name of Mr. Gordon. In that corner by Mr. Gordon, Calix, on days when it rained, people who had bananas up in Madigua had a lot of difficulty traversing that particular section of the road. 4x4s were having problems traversing that section of the road. And you can imagine if a driver is coming down that road with, say, 150 boxes of bananas on a pickup, how much of a risk it was for him. The goods vehicles that service the shops up in Upper Austin Hill were having difficulty traversing that section of the road. So we took a decision that the monies that were available for phase 1, we would have done the most critical part of the road, and in phases 2 and 3, we would have done the piece from Metro up to Scott's Place. And then the third phase would have been from in the vicinity of Bebe's house to go into Tumeris and up by Aidan.
So those other phases have not been done, basically?
No, they have not been done. The contracts were already signed. The monies were allocated. There was a change of government. And as a result of the people of Dennery North, and in Dennery River and Austin Hill in particular, voting for the Labour Party in the majority, they have been made to suffer. The road has deteriorated. It is in a very, very bad condition. But as I've said to them, colleagues, they just need to hold strain. Relief will come their way soon enough once a general election is dated and called in St. Lucia. I can say the same for the Alemon Road in Grand Riviere. Again, we had to do that road in phases because there was so much to do in Dennery North when I got in. Prior to 2011, colleagues, anybody, whether you're a supporter of the Labour Party or the United Workers' Party, I'm inviting you into the constituency. And I want you to point out to me the work that the UWP did in Dennery North between 2006 and 2011. Absolutely nothing. So and at a time when we had projects happening everywhere else in St. Lucia, there was nothing substantial to talk about in Dennery North. So when I came in, I was overwhelmed with the needs of the people, the number of roads that had to be fixed, playing fields that had to be restored, schools that needed attention. There was a lot to do, and I could not, and as you would know, you get a certain amount of money for the year. And I took a decision that I do not believe it would have been in the best interest of my constituents to take, say, $1 million and just do one road and one community benefit. I looked at some of the roads that were critical, and we attended to sections of those roads that really, really, really needed attention.
I think
So that foolish statement about a section of the road being done because my supporters live in that particular area. Anybody who knows me well will tell you I don't operate like that.
Right. I think we're seeing about maybe over $200 million being expended right now on road works, and that doesn't include monies that have also been budgeted to do the Millennium Highway and the West Coast Road, and that doesn't include monies for a $46 million bridge. So you're saying that you don't think out of that $200 million pot very much has gone, or a fair share has gone to the communities in Dennery North?
The government of the United Workers' Party has done absolutely nothing in Dennery North in 4.5 years. Absolutely nothing. And I would have told you on a previous show that the only substantial work you saw happening in Dennery North was the continuation of the Dennery North Water Redevelopment Project, which was initiated by the St. Lucia Labour Party. I will say again, it was the St. Lucia Labour Party that sourced 13 million EC dollars in the form of grant funding from the government of Mexico. Upon realizing that amount would not have been sufficient to do the project in its entirety, it was the St. Lucia Labour Party that put forward a loan application to the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, where we requested an amount of 22 million EC dollars. Okay? So when the UWP came into office, all they had to do was to continue the project.
And I think that's similar to the VA4 project as well. I think there was a VA4 water supply project, which we now see.
Yes. I noticed at one of the sittings of Parliament, the minister responsible for water resources and MP for Barbados tried to claim the VA4 water project as an initiative of the United Workers' Party. Colleagues, I was at the Ministry of Infrastructure, the conference room, when those projects, the projects were launched, I still have a copy of the program. Now, some might argue, but why is it that politicians are quarreling over who initiated the project and who started the project? Sometimes you have to set the public record straight. But I think the biggest beneficiaries from those initiatives have been the people of Olio, the people of La Ressource, Despin, Dennery Riviere, Belmont, Richmond, Grand Riviere, La Pelle. They have been the biggest beneficiaries of that project. So in absence of that particular project, which I mentioned, there's absolutely nothing substantial that has happened in Dennery North. Last week or 2 weeks ago, you saw on social media a Kudme in Alemon, a part of Grand Riviere. and you saw the candidate carrying a block to show that, I mean, she's a worker and whatnot. I mean, that is her choice. That is how she decides to sell her work on the ground. But I have a serious difficulty at a time when tens of millions of dollars are being expended on roads. You just have to go next door in Dennery South as we speak. There's a DVRP, Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, a drainage component, $3 million. The Bolo Bell Road in Dennery, and that is Dennery South, almost $2 million. The Dennery Plainfield upgrade, almost $5 million. The Lime Road, $1.5 million. You go to the Lakai, you see the refurbishment of the playground. It's not of a size to call it a Plainfield, a playground, $500,000. All of this is happening in Dennery South, a stone throw away. But in Dennery North, as we see in Creole, you buy a petit pie, you don't sack cement in Dennery North in 4.5 years. I have begged, I've pleaded, I have gone on bended knees to ask for an intervention in relation to the Larissus Health Center. The health center needs to be reinstated. People tell you, oh, the health center got burnt when the Labour Party was in office. Yes, that much I will admit. But shortly thereafter, Calix, when we went through the budgetary process, there was a grand amount. We did not borrow that amount. It was the Republic of China, Taiwan, Government Taiwan, that gave us some money, and that was in the budget. When the government changed, they removed it, they took it out of the budget, and 4.5, almost 5 years later, the health center is just there in a state of disrepair. And people have to go to a makeshift facility at the intersection of the highway and the Larissus Road. And it was bad enough, the place was cramped, Calix, and you could not tell who was there to see the doctor or who was just occupying the space. The bus shelter, waiting for a minivan to go to Castries or Beaufort. And at the same time that the Larissus Health Center was out of commission, the government took a decision that they were going to close the Richmond Health Center. And we had a situation where the people of Dennery North were really at their wits' end in terms of accessing primary health care. But by nature, and I've said it before, we are resilient people. These things are not going to break us, Calix. And as parliamentary rep, I know it can be very frustrating for me. And if the objective of the government is to frustrate me because I'm an opposition parliamentarian, I need to let them know that I'm even more fortified in my stance to give expression and representation to the people of Dennery North. I will speak out. I will be very respectful in advancing a case for the people of Dennery North. But I think the treatment meted out to opposition parliamentarians in this country today is the worst that it has ever been. The Constituency Development Program, Calix, I can tell you...
But before we get to that, Mr. Shawn Edwards, we are due for a break. So we should try to take that break at this point in time for our weather news. And when we come back, we'll continue to have that conversation about the Constituency Development Program, as well as I want to touch on the issue of bananas as well, which is, of course, very important to your constituency. And welcome back to the lunchroom. Thanks for sticking with us. And we are speaking with the MP for Dennery North. He is Mr. Shawn Edwards, into his third term and looking for a fourth. Mr. Edwards, of course, you were just talking about the issue of constituency development and...
Alex, I need to correct you. I'm about completing my second term and I'm vying for a third.
My apologies. So you're in your second... You're completing your second term.
Yes, I'm a two-star general.
Right. My apologies. I was giving you more badge that you really had. Now, constituency development, though, of course, we hear this complaint all the time from year after year. Is this just normal? Is this how it is normally? I mean, the Labour Party was there. Would it not have been a similar sort of situation where members of the opposition UWP then would have been complaining that not enough is being done in their constituency?
Alex, what I'm about to say, I want the objective and patriotic solutions to just hear me on this particular point, if nothing else. I mean, we are in election mode and the country is highly polarized as we speak. And there are some persons, for them, objectivity and fairness have gone out the window. But to those persons who are patriotic and who still subscribe to fairness, I want them to hear this. As we speak, in excess or close to $100 million has been spent on the constituency, through the Constituency Development Program, the CDP, as funded by the Taiwanese. In 4.5 years, as the duly elected parliamentary representative for Denrinoff, I have not presided over a single drain, not a wall, not a footpath, not a road in my constituency. Now, some will tell you, when the Labour Party was in office, the Labour Party did the same to opposition parliamentarians. Calix, that is a lie. That is a lie. When we were in government, in the period 2011 to 2016, every single parliamentarian, UWP or SLP, got to preside over projects in his or her constituency. And I say her because the member of parliament for Miku North was in opposition between 2011 and 2016. And she will tell you that she presided over projects in her constituency under the CDP during the reign of the St. Lucia Labour Party. But to date, from 2016 to 2021, I have not presided over a single project. Now, those in opposition will tell you that perhaps they did not get the same amount or the same quantum of resources was not allocated to their constituencies as were allocated to St. Lucia Labour Party held constituencies. But they got. I think it is unfair, and it is taking the country in a wrong direction for a government to deliberately starve duly elected members of parliament from state resources to weaken their chances at the polls. You heard the Prime Minister in the parliament on Tuesday, and he wanted to let us know that, yes, his government was about to unveil some very exciting plans for independence. And there was a piece of literature circulated in the parliament on Tuesday. And one of the things that stood out for me was a question on that paper. How far have we come as a country? The United Workers' Party promised to build a new St. Lucia. A new St. Lucia. And it sounded well that we need to build a new St. Lucia. And this United Workers' Party government and Prime Minister came in with a solid enough mandate to effect positive change in this country. But almost 5 years later, after assuming the reins of government, I think St. Lucia is more divided and more polarized than it has ever been. And if it has to take a St. Lucia Labour Party government upon assuming office, and I do not want to speak for the leader of my party in that respect, but if it will take a St. Lucia Labour Party government to correct those wrongs and to take the country in that direction, we will do it. When somebody has been elected in the majority by their constituents, they must be in a position where they can access state resources to execute projects that would bring relief to the people whose interests they represent in the parliament.
Now, with the little time that we have left, Mr. Edwards, I just want to segue into the issue of bananas. I don't know if you're going to allow me to do so, because I think it's really important for your constituency in particular. The Mabria Valley has been seen to be one of these critical banana producing areas for a very long time. We've known the whole long history of bananas changing over the years, but it still is a very important crop for production in your constituency.
Absolutely. Of course, we know about the failed promises of the United Workers' Party to the farmers, the banana farmers of this country, because they wanted to win elections. UWP wanted to win elections, so they made some very exciting pronouncements to banana farmers. The farmers believed them, and then since then, they have failed to deliver to the farmers. They have violated the expectations of the farmers. And what is most painful about it is not just the fact that the farmers were taken for a ride, but the government continues about its business with absolutely no remorse. Calix, I was in government as the Minister for Youth Development and Sports, and there are a number of programs and things I wanted to see done in youth and sports that I just did not have the time to do. I could not have done them because of resource constraints and things of that sort. And I was man enough to tell the youth and sports fraternity that this is what I had in mind, but unfortunately I was unable to do it. When I asked Ezekiel Joseph in the parliament to apologize to the farmers, he saw it as a personal attack on him. He saw that, and that is not what I was insinuating at all. You took the farmers for a ride. You had them to go back to the fields, those who had already left. You had them to unclear more land. You had them to take small loans to plant more bananas. There was a buoyancy in the community. Fig carviwe. Because then the market of France. And people went back to the farms, Calix. And in typical Dead fashion, they were on those fields from the wee hours of the morning to late afternoon. And we saw a resuscitation of sorts in the banana industry. And when it was time to harvest, when it was time for the fruits to have been exported to the French territory, the government literally turned its back on the farmers. And so you had birds having a feast in the fields, eating banana bunches on the tree. People used to drive all the way from Beaufort to just come and take the bananas that had been chopped to the ground, go and feed their cattle and their pigs. I saw that in my eyes. I used to be on the farm to watch the farmers cut down the bananas, and I will never stand idly by, Calix, and allow anybody to take the banana farmers of Denrinoff and by extension the banana farmers of this country for a ride. When the Prime Minister presented the appropriation bill, the last time he did, he still referenced bananas to France, but the farmers are waiting for them. And in more recent developments in the industry, the government trying to work collaboratively with the NFTO. What did we hear, Calix? The composition of the board. The minister agreed with the NFTO, but when he went to cabinet over the chairmanship of the board, I think his proposal and the position that he had assumed with the NFTO that was shot down by his cabinet colleagues.
Now help us out here a little bit, because I think we've seen Windfresh, which is the exporting company. They have now gone into administration. They're no longer operating, if that's my understanding, winding down. And the NFTO is now trying to handle export. Is that what's going on?
Basically, I think it's more than that. The NFTO is basically trying to salvage what is left of the banana industry. And the government has a moral obligation to the banana farmers of this country, and more specifically the banana industry. So they're trying to work collaboratively by having a board that will provide oversight. The composition of the board, I'm not too clear in terms of how many reps we have for the NFTO and the government. But one thing I know they agreed to when government met with the NFTO is that the chairmanship of that particular entity would have resided with the NFTO. The minister took it to the cabinet, and the cabinet disagreed, because as far as they were concerned, if government was going to put money into the operations of the NFTO or to help keep the banana industry alive, the chairmanship of that board should be dictated by the government.
Is it fair to say that Windfresh is going to be no more? Is that the direction that it's looking at?
You've been futuristic. I don't know that we still have Windfresh in terms of the function that it produced. You would have heard me on another program telling you about a gentleman in my constituency, Rene, a banana farmer for 44 years, who came to my home one Sunday morning to tell me that Shawn must have what he has said dimanche, mais many people do. Pour 44 years, c'est la première fois qu'il parle à l'Angleterre. So, yes, Windfresh is no more in terms of the services that Windfresh provided to banana farmers in this country. Calix, I sat in cabinet, Calix, and every single week at cabinet, the tourism minister used to come with his memos to try and give more impetus to the tourism sector. And on the lawn Theophilus, we saw record arrival numbers. So the record arrival numbers that they're talking about today is not as a result of a magic wand that was waved by the UWP. No, that had started under lawn Theophilus, and every week Minister Theophilus used to come to the cabinet seeking concessions for major players and emerging players in the tourism sector, the benefit of which we've seen today. And I understand that we had to give concessions because of the economic benefits that we were deriving as a country from tourism. But I'm saying, in much as if we can do that for tourism, we owe it as a country to the banana farmers and the agricultural sector by extension. We started that process by enacting legislation that would enable farmers to get concessions from the government. We did not take the process as far as we had intended, but we were hoping that the government that succeeded us, because government, as far as I'm concerned, should be a continuum and not necessarily a party thing where once the party changes, the work program of a government for the betterment of a country changes. Nothing has happened with respect to legislation to further empower farmers and to give them opportunities to expand their operations and to make a more meaningful economic contribution to this country. Okay? But to go back to bananas, there will always be a place for bananas in the national economy and more so in the rural economy. When you have a thriving banana industry, it is reflected by the crowds you see at the bakery. It is reflected in the buoyancy you see around the little shops in the different communities, Oleon, Lapel, Goravin, Tamazu, and all those places. So I will continue to be an advocate for banana farmers and the banana industry, Alex. But the farmers have been put through a lot. The minister has failed miserably, if you ask me. This has been a rather indifferent term for him. At least in 2016, 2011, there was a discernible enthusiasm and buoyancy, even if nothing substantial was achieved, but you could have seen a minister that was on the move, to use their own term, agriculture on the move. And as I said, even if there wasn't much to show for that movement and buoyancy, but there was a bit of enthusiasm, to be fair to him.
As a result of the DSH, there was supposed to be some relocations to the Mabria Valley, maybe not necessarily in your constituency, but in the neighboring Dennery South. One was I believe, a placement of a meat processing facility in the Mabria Valley. Has that ever happened yet?
Alex, there are things that are more basic that the government has promised to do in the Mabria Valley that they've not done. So I don't expect any such move to happen. Anytime the government takes a decision that is offensive to people, be it on a national level or in a particular geographic pocket, they always come up with something to try and appease the people. When they were told that it would not have been in the best interest of the sports people of Soufrière to go with an artificial surface in Soufrière, they quickly went to Rubies or whatever, in Soufrière, and they said that they had acquired land
for a cricket ground.
To build a cricket ground.
Right. I don't think anything has come of that either.
As soon as the debate, people became less vocal, you heard nothing about that particular cricket ground. They went to Vieux-Fort. They put the drag racers out of business, for want of a better word.
I was coming to that, yes. I heard they're heading to Mabria Valley as well.
Again, they've gone to the Mabria. They've come and said that this is where they will locate, or they will build a facility to accommodate the people who have been affected as a result of the airport expansion.
Now, are those the same Ranju farmlands that were supposed to be earmarked for banana production?
Well, they were not just earmarked for banana production. What I can tell you is that the banana improvement productivity unit, or whatever they call it, they had already allocated lands to farmers down there. And that piece of land is somewhere in Lakai, somewhere between the Fondor Coast and the old Lime sugar factory.
Right.
There were a number of farmers who were cultivating there. A substantial portion of that land has also been used for cattle rearing. I know the livestock division, or personnel from the livestock division, have been working with some of our cattle farmers in the Mabria Valley to make use of that particular plot of land. Now I'm being told that it has been earmarked for a drag racing facility. So I say this to say that once a particular interest group, a community, or people generally are disgruntled by a decision of the government always moves quickly to appease them and tell them this is what we will give you as an alternative to what is being taken away. And then 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road, you see absolutely no movement to suggest that they were ever serious in some of the pronouncements they make to try and appease people.
Just in the last few minutes that we have, small business, how are they faring in the Dennery Valley right about now, especially with the protocols and measures?
Alex, there's been a bad period, a bad 5 years for a lot of small businesses in Central. When we come and we say that the government favors big business over small business, when we say that the government favors foreigners over locals, we're not saying that because we want to be malicious or we're facetious or we do not like the country, we're not patriotic. It is a fact. It is a fact that this government does not favor. And when you try and advance the case for the marginalized and the dispossessed in society, they tell you you're encouraging a culture of mendicancy and the bottom line is, whether we like it or not, there will always be people in St. Lucia who cannot provide for themselves, and the state has a moral obligation and responsibility to reach out to them and ensure that they enjoy certain comfort levels. The small businesses, there are people who left England, Canada, USA to come to St. Lucia to establish business, not because they want money, they want to make a contribution to this country. And then they have to stand idly by when things are tough and just see government reaching out to foreign entities. A foreign entity can benefit from $40 million of NIC money to unbuild golf courses. Government can retrofit a factory shell for Odro Labs. And whilst this is happening, there are small businesses in St. Lucia who need a lot less just for government to meet them halfway, but the government will not. The little shops in my community as we speak, the majority of them, some are closed. Some of the shopkeepers tell you that they cannot even make ends meet to the extent that they can replenish the shelf after people from the community have come to buy stuff. It is a real struggle. Even at the car wash, the gentleman who owns the car wash down the road was saying that in better times, sometimes he'd wash 15, 20 vehicles a day. But when he gets 2 and 3 these days, he has to say thank you. Things are hard. I know these are difficult times for our country. I'm on the record as saying that, yes, I believe St. Lucians, by their very nature, are a resilient people. But the government has to be very, very careful in terms of the tone that it sets and the message it sends out there to the wider population. And this government has demonstrated time and again that it does not encourage, by its action, by its use of resources, the small and average St. Lucians who want to make an objective contribution to the development of their country, whether it is in the realm of business, agriculture, or what have you. And it is for this reason I am saying that the time has come for us to revisit the tenure of the United Workers' Party. They need to be voted out of office, and they need to give the St. Lucia Labour Party an opportunity to take St. Lucia in another direction.
Mr. Shawn Edward, thank you so very much for your time here today at the lunchroom. Of course, hopefully we'll be able to get a chance to chat again. The time always flies by, and of course, it had to be social distance because we are in the COVID period. But of course, we do hope that you are staying safe indeed. Thank you so very much. We were just speaking with Mr. Shawn Edwards. He is the Member of Parliament for Dennery North and the second deputy political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party.